Hi, how does social media affect communication skills positively? I've designed and structured this video to actually make you a more effective communicator through social media. If you choose to watch this video, it'll save you a mountain of time and some of the burnout and the not so positive stuff often connected with social media. I'm Chad Littlefield. If you haven't seen me around social media and YouTube, I live on this internet place quite often, and I've learned a lot about how to use these platforms as tools to affect communication more positively, and I'm really pumped to share the tools that I know that will save you a mountain of time and burnout and make you a better communicator. Let's get into it. First, I'm gonna share a framework that totally transformed the way that I looked at social media and made it a whole heap more fulfilling. Then I'm gonna share 3 benefits or strengths of social media that you probably haven't thought of, right? There are some obvious ones, but I'm gonna share ones that you haven't thought of, and 3 tech tools that I use in my day-to-day to improve communication. Oh my goodness, this framework came from Sherry Turkle in an article titled The Flight from Conversation in the New York Times. And in it, she gave this beautiful metaphor about sips versus gulps of connection. Since I learned that, I've taken this metaphor a little bit further, and so I want you to imagine that on a hot summer day, you haven't drank water in about 24 hours, and there's this nice ice cold glass of water sitting on the table, and you reach out for it and you are parched, and you pull it up to your mouth and you go, it's not very satisfying, right? It's like actually really not satisfying at all to just take a sip when what you really want to do is take a gulp. Social media is often used for sips and sound bites of connection rather than gulps of communication. And so this framework, when I go on to, it doesn't matter, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, I want to create gulps of connection rather than sips. I could create a series of 60-second tip videos that I post to YouTube, but I would much rather give a gulp of connection with a tutorial that breaks down more than just one teeny little sip or tip, because sips and tips are often easily forgotten. And so if you want to use social media to improve communication and improve communication skills, think about every time you log on to whatever platform it is, consider how do I create a gulp of connection or communication right now, not just a sip. With that metaphor in mind, benefit number 1 of social media is that it provides infinite amount of conversation topics. Just rewind for a minute to like the 1800s and imagine how much you had to talk about with your neighbor the one time per month that you rode your wagon 8 miles to go see them, right? It's like, what'd you do today? Farmed. What'd you do today? Farmed, right? Whereas now, before you even see another human being in life, you've probably consumed an hour worth of content, ideas, videos, some silly, some informational, something like, we have so much information pouring into our head. That's the benefit of social media, is that it has provided infinite amounts of conversation topics. It's not that we often use it as a tool to spark infinite conversation topics, but it has provided us infinite amounts of content. The caveat to that, and a tech tool that I use is on iPhones and Androids, there are now native ways to manage your screen time. So you'll also notice that the feeds of every social media platform are infinitely scrolling. So in order to spark and improve communication skills, you don't need to scroll for 87 hours. You can actually get a whole bunch of data, interesting things, learn some stuff, laugh a little bit, all in the span of 15 to 20 minutes. However, there are thousands and thousands of employees that are paid quite high salaries to ensure that you get addicted to each of these platforms. And so go into your native screen time limits and be really conscious and commit to yourself, because the tool isn't enough of a help. You also need to go in and say, okay, I want to only spend 15 minutes on Instagram per day and 5 minutes on Facebook and maybe 25 minutes on YouTube because I learn a little bit more that way, right? You get to choose your screen time, and then your device will automatically say, hey, you're at the limit. Now, being really transparent, have I set screen time limits and then just said, okay, next, because you can get out of it, right? You like push a couple buttons and then you're right back into the app. It doesn't lock you out completely. And it's this little tool that prevents you from doom scrolling, which is a new phrase that I've heard recently, which was quite awesome to have in my brain. Second benefit, social media gives access to everyone. It does not matter if you are rich or poor, you live in Pakistan or Idaho, you have access to so much information, so much social data through social media, and you have access to connections, right? So something that really keeps classes where they are is the inability to network outside of your class, right? So poor people tend to live around poor people, so they tend to refer each other to each other. And the same with rich. When we talk about the 1%, right? We don't mix class all that much. Social media gives us a chance to step outside of our class, step outside of our immediate network and reach and learn and study from and potentially be in conversation with people outside of our class. And that communication, A, gives you empathy for people who are different than you, and that empathy allows you to serve the groups that you're serving better. One of the most important aspects to effective communication is empathy. Can you put one of your shoes in somebody else's world and describe their world as they see it? On social media, they're describing their world, so all you have to do is read it. You just read about it, just look at it. Now granted, it might be the highlights of their world, depending on what platform, but it does give you clues into what do they care about, what are they struggling with, etc. And that can make your communication, especially if you're running any sort of business or you're offering any sort of product or service to people, including education, that level of empathy takes communication to a whole nother level that most people never reach in communication. They never get to the place of empathy where they're actually really seeing, hearing, and understanding another person's perspective. The caveat to the fact that social media gives access to all means that you have access to everyone's stuff. Or garbage. You have access to everyone's garbage, right? And I found this tech tool. This was a couple years ago, and there are tools like this for multiple different platforms. You need to Google them yourself. But I originally found it for Facebook 5 or 7 years ago, called Newsfeed Eradicator. And if you type in, or if you Google Newsfeed Eradicator, it'll pull up this plugin for Google Chrome that actually deletes your entire newsfeed on Facebook. You can stay connected with all the people that you're connected with, but when you jump on, the most addicting part of the platform is just left with a quote. So it just leaves like a little inspirational quote or something, and you don't see what your first grade buddy had for lunch that day. And that's really, really useful because it can improve your communication in the sense that you can be more deliberate and intentional. So now when I go onto Facebook, I'm only going to either groups and niches that I like to be a part of, that I like to learn from, or to send messages to specific people, as opposed to being sucked into doom scrolling, random stuff that I don't need to see, that I don't need to put into my brain. And last but not least, on the positive side to doom scrolling is viral videos, and the shared content often gives people something to connect over. So when I get together with my brother, it's amazing that somehow the algorithm has showed both of us the exact same video. And so that's awesome because we have the shared experience, we have the shared context. It's kind of like when you read the same book as somebody, you have all this shared language. And so when you see the same videos, or you're able to share the same videos with each other, it actually creates this shared experience, even if that experience is not happening at the exact same time. So the idea of social media creating asynchronous shared experiences is really cool. And you can go overboard with that. One of the books that I read this year is called Indistractable, and it was about the skill of, rather than having your apps master you, having you master your apps. And one of the most practical little tech tools that I learned was this idea right here. If you can see that, I have a folder on my phone where all of my apps, I only got 2 pages of apps. On here are all the tools that I use on a daily basis. And here I've got a couple folders, and one of them is titled Slot Machine. And everything that is a slot machine to me, which is pretty much all social media and a whole bunch of other stuff, I put in that, meaning slot machine, the reward system of like, I have to pull the lever or I have to scroll because I don't know what's coming right underneath. So I would invite you right now to go and make a slot machine folder. It's helped my brain communicate more positively using these platforms by knowing that this could be a slot machine, but I don't want to use it as that. I should end this video by acknowledging that I fail on a very regular basis with all of this, and yet everything I shared with you, I have practiced and has made my own social media communication and life more effective, more impactful, more positive, and a bit more fulfilling and less draining. I'm Chad Littlefield. I've posted regular videos to help leaders and educators make connection and engagement easy, and social media is one of the ways we connect. Have an awesome day.